Hello and welcome to this Hindu special broadcast on the results coming from the Sri Lankan elections. We've just seen that Anura Kumara Dissanayake of the JVP has been elected as the ninth president of Sri Lanka, the executive president. He's been sworn in Colombo a short while ago. The results clearly are momentous. They mean a dramatic change from the politics of the past in Sri Lanka. And I have with me two very qualified people to discuss this. I have with me Meera Srinivasan, the Hindus correspondent in Colombo, who's been watching and reporting Sri Lankan affairs for at least 10 years for the Hindu. I have with me Nirupama Subramanian from Chennai, also a former correspondent of the Hindu and the Indian Express in Colombo, watches Sri Lankan and South Asian affairs slowly. And I myself, Amit Baruah, have been a correspondent for the Hindu in Sri Lanka. So you have all the expertise of the Hindu that can be gathered in this show. So I do hope you're watching. And I'm going to go first straight to Meera. Meera, I saw your reports in the Hindu today. Quite a dramatic change in the country. The election of a JVP leader, once on the fringes of Sri Lankan politics, the JVP joining the mainstream. So tell us, what's the mood in Colombo? Is there a sense of excitement, or is there a sense of just another change? What do you gather?
Uh, Thank you, Amit. I think, as you said, this was a very crucial election because this is the first time that voters had a chance to elect their leader after citizens ousted the last leader of this country, 2022. Gotabaya Rajapaksa was booted out and he had to resign. And after that, this is the first instance of people voting in their new leader. And in that, there was definitely a lot of excitement and passion around this election. And after the outcome, certainly I sense a lot of excitement, especially among those who sought change and those who backed Anura Kumara Dissanayaka's candidacy. And also some skepticism from others who are waiting to see if the NPP and the JVP, which is its chief constituent, whether they can deliver on the promises that have been made, because this is still a very challenging time for the country in terms of economic recovery. And so I think it's excitement or skepticism depending on which side of the vote the person was. Otherwise, I think in general, I sense a lot of hope, and people are hoping and looking forward to things improving for Sri Lanka.
And Meera, from your perch in Colombo, did you see this change coming? Was there anything that you saw which hinted that such a dramatic transformation is underway?
What we were able to see with some certainty was that people were really, calling for change. In fact, taking off from the chant during the Aragalaya or the People's Struggle 2 years ago. But many, even experts within Sri Lanka, felt that this was a very hard election to call because this was the first time they had a three-way contest in a presidential election. And the incumbent Ranil Wickremesinghe at that time was, credited with setting things in order in terms of economic recovery and bringing in a measure of stability. And then you had two opposition candidates who were promising change, and depending on the degree of change the voters sought, I think they chose between the two opposition candidates mainly. So in a sense, we knew that there could be change, and change was in fact likely, but it was very hard to tell what sort of change that might be. And of course, the ground sentiment, and we tried to capture some of that in our reporting, was very much in favor of Anura Kumara Dissanayake. And anecdotally, we kept hearing that people wanted to see him in power. And yes, in that sense, we knew change was certain, but it would have been presumptuous to actually predict a specific outcome before yesterday.
Before I go to Nirupama, Meera, I just want to ask you one other thing. Would the votes of Ranil Wickremesinghe, who got a little under 20% of the popular vote, and the votes of Sajid Premadasa, would this have meant a victory for Sajid Premadasa, or would this vote have splintered and some of it would have gone to Anura Kumara Dissanayake as well?
It is hard to say. I mean, what we know is, within camps of both Ranil Wickramasinghe and Sajid Premadasa, there were many supporters of both who felt that they had a better case to make to the electorate if they were together. But Mr. Wickramasinghe, already having been in power through a parliamentary vote for 2 years, had the advantage of people seeing him as bringing in stability, those who felt that economy was stable, but also the disadvantage of very, very strong incumbency in the short time because of some of the measures he resorted to. So if the two camps had come together, it would have depended on who was contesting and how the other was supporting them. And this also is a time when SJB and UNP have been apart for a few years now, and there would have been many things to reconcile. So it's hard to say. Numerically, it looks like if they had been together, they could have won. But it really depends on several factors that would determine how that consolidation might have happened.
So I'm going to bring Nirupama into the conversation. Nirupama, welcome to the show again. I wanted to ask you, Nirupama, you were there in Sri Lanka at a time when there were two principal parties, the United National Party, UNP, and the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, SLFP. The results of this election seem to suggest that the days of the old parties are perhaps over. Maybe I'm overstating my case a little, or there are rumps of those parties that exist, and it's pretty confusing to watch from Delhi who's going where. So do you think that the election of Mr. Dissanayake marks an end to the old politics or old rivalries of the UNP and SLFP, and we are seeing a new beginning in Sri Lankan politics?
I mean, definitely this is a big change. The fact that the JVP is now in the seat of power, and that the other two, the SLFP, as you said, and the UNP, which have been around from the time of independence, the SLFP slightly later. So these two parties are today, in fact, non-existent if you look at them in a parliamentary sense. The UNP did not get any seats in parliament in the last parliamentary election. And Ranil Wickramasinghe just nominated himself on the percentage of votes the party had received. And the SLFP had a few seats. But yes, that old leadership is gone. And much will depend also on how the JVP conducts itself now, how Anura Kumara Dissanayake leads the party. It has a huge reputation to live down, and to steer the country in a constructive way in its foreign relations and so on. Much will depend on all that. So the SLFP now has reincarnated under the Rajapaksas as the SLPP. I mean, many of the old SLFPers are now in SLPP, and many of the UNP are now with Sajid Premadasa as the SJB. So yes, I mean, the names have changed, but I think the old politicians, or maybe a new generation of the old style of politicians, is still intact. So much will depend on how Anura Kumara Dissanayake now takes this whole thing forward. Huge expectations he has to meet of steering the economy out of its mess right now. And the whole geopolitical environment in the Indian Ocean, around Sri Lanka, in its relationship with China, India, all that people will be watching for the kind of maturity that a whole lot of voters expect him to show, and already believe that he has.
Would you say, Nirupama, that we saw the People's Uprising in 22? We saw the dramatic departure of Gotabaya Rajapakse, much like Hasina, to follow, in August this year. So do you think that the people of Sri Lanka who've seen really bad times economically on the economic front, price rise, difficulty in getting essentials. Then we had President Gotabaya Rajapakse deciding that organic agriculture was the only agriculture that should be practiced in the country. Do you feel that this vote for Anura Dissanayake, he's somebody he's been a minister before, but he's in a sense, he's an outlier in the political system. He or his party or his people have not really tasted power. So is that the reason why this dissatisfaction with mainstream politicians in Sri Lanka, is that the reason why this vote has come for Mr. Dissanayake and his JVP?
Definitely. I think there was an outpouring of angst at the time of the Aragalia at how badly mismanaged, how badly their existing politicians at that time, the existing leadership at that time, had mismanaged the whole thing. Plus, don't forget that just prior to the presidency of Gotabaya Rajapaksa was this government of good governance that people had voted in 2015. Doing away with Mahinda Rajapaksa's 10 years of authoritarian governance. And, it was accused of so many things, nepotism, corruption, and so on. People were tired of Mahinda Rajapaksa at that stage. They had voted in Maithripala Sirisena, who was also from the SLFP, but he rose up as a dissident against Rajapaksa, and his prime minister was Ranil Wickremesinghe. But that government proved to be such a letdown for the people, and it led to the Easter bombings, and then it brought back the Rajapaksas again. So in the Aragalia of 2022, you saw that pent up emotions, against the anger against the old politicians, against the Colombo 3, Colombo 7, Colombo 5 politicians who had ruled the country for such a long time. And of course, what went in the JVP's favor was that it threw itself into the Aragalia. First, it was a bystander. Its offshoots were taking part. There was a students' front, and there was another front of trade unions, which had actually moved away from the JVP over the years. They were participants in the Aragalia. And the JVP then gradually started supporting the Aragalia. So it was, it went in the JVP's favor. It went in Anura Kumara Dissanayake's favor. But let's also not forget that Anura Kumara Dissanayake has been a very pragmatic politician over the last 20 years. He is, JVP had suffered two big splits, one in 2008 and one in 2010 or 11. And in both those splits, Anura Kumara Dissanayake emerged as an anchor of the JVP, while more charismatic leaders left the party to be with the Rajapaksas, basically. At that time, the question was whether the JVP was losing its identity, had become too identified with the power elite that had been ruling Colombo for all those years, that it had become a bourgeois party. And the people who left the party at that time wanted to keep those alliances with the mainstream parties. And Anura Kumara Dissanayake and the other leaders of the party at that time, of the JVP at that time, decided that no, they wanted to protect this their unique identity of being a pro-people, anti-establishment party. And so you come to the stage where Anura Kumara Dissanayake then becomes a candidate of the NPP in the 2019 election. Has a miserable result, less than 3% or just over 3%, and then decides to throw in his hat in the ring again for this thing, and he's come up on top. So he's a very pragmatic kind of guy. Although the JVP has been on the fringes of so long, it has also tasted power as part of the ruling coalition with Chandrika Kumaratunga in 2005, but not the kind of power that AKD will now have. I mean, the executive presidency of Sri Lanka is one of the most powerful offices in the whole world. And, JRJ once, Jayawardena the architect of this constitution that Sri Lanka presently has, once said that, the only thing that I can't do with this constitution is change a man into a woman and vice versa. Everything else is possible. So we'll see how he takes that forward.
Meera, I want to bring you in here again. And I just want to ask you, what is your sense? I mean, we saw Anura Dissanayake make an appeal yesterday to all communities, talking of taking everyone forward. And the little box that accompanies your story on the foreign page of the Hindu suggests that Sajid Premadasa and Ranil Wickremesinghe probably got more votes from the north and the east than did Anura Kumara Dissanayake. What is your sense overall, looking at the past positions of the JVP on the ethnic question and going forward from here? Do you feel that this, he has got some support, but, the support that he's seen, obviously from the north and east, is not, not overwhelming or not a big majority for him. Do you think that he is now in a position to at least take forward the other communities, not in a resolution of any difficult or naughty questions, but just in day-to-day governance?
I think Anura Kumara Dissanayake has acknowledged this, even as he gave a very brief address today after he was sworn in president. He said that he will engage with everybody and strive for democratic rule. And he said he will work to win the confidence of all those who voted for him, and especially those who didn't vote for him. So I think that can be taken as an acknowledgement of areas that he didn't fare as well. And in the north and east, you're right, Sajid Premadasa got the highest share of the vote from the Tamil majority areas, 41.83%. And following him was Ranil Wickremesinghe, who got 25.13%. And AKD, as he's known, got 14.95%, just close to 15%. So it's interesting because the Tamil electorate was very fragmented this election. So you have a lot of divisions within the Tamil polity and within even individual parties. So as you know, there was a common Tamil candidate who was fielded by some political groups and civil society organizations with diaspora backing. And that candidate, P. Ariyanethan, got 12.91%, much less than all these other candidates. So the rhetoric before the election itself was quite divided. In terms of Anura Kumara Dissanayake's performance in the north and east, I think they started their outreach, but it was very clear that, on two accounts, he wasn't likely to get a very big mandate from the Tamils. One was that he was not a very familiar or a known entity to many young or middle-aged Tamils, because they know Sajid Premadasa, who contested last election, and they overwhelmingly voted for him. And they also know Ranil Wickremesinghe from the time of the peace process and so on. The other thing about AKD for some Tamils was really the past of the JVP. So their very fierce opposition to Tamil self-determination rights in the 80s, and then the support for the war and the opposition to the Indo-Lanka Accord that sought to address this ethnic conflict. So all that was also playing on the minds of some Tamils, and there was definitely suspicion and skepticism. So I think going by their public messaging before the election and the manifesto, we see that there is acknowledgement of this need to win the trust of minorities, especially Tamils. So in AKD's manifesto, one of the key elements is they don't explicitly name or commit to the 13th Amendment, which is already in the Constitution. But in some public speeches, he has said provincial councils will be held and that what's in the Constitution will be implemented in any case. But they have sought to take forward this new constitution that the 2015 Yahapalniya government attempted to draft, with the participation of the Tamil National Alliance, at that time the main formation representing Tamils. So the NPP has pledged to take that constitution draft forward, and that constitution actually sought to go beyond the 13th Amendment, which all Tamils see as being necessary in some measure, but some think it's not even necessary. But most see it as necessary but not sufficient. So the hope from Tamils would be that that pledge is taken seriously and implemented with sincerity.
And what is your sense? I mean, one of the things that has been very resilient, as Nirupama was pointing out, is the executive presidency. And we've long seen, expressions that it would be abolished once X takes power or Y takes power. I'd also be interested in knowing what is the JVP's own position on the executive presidency.
So both in this election, significantly, both Sajith Premadasa and Anura Kumara Dissanayake, the two main oppositional candidates, have pledged to abolish executive presidency. It's part of their manifesto as well. Except if you ask Sri Lankan citizens, they will tell us, we'll wait till it happens, because so many past presidents have made the promise but conveniently forgotten the pledge once they've actually taken the seat. So it remains to be seen whether the NPP and Anura Kumara Dissanayake are able to implement the pledge. And in this process, there will be a timeline that's required. There will also be a requirement for a new constitution and also a parliamentary majority for that. And that would be a challenging aspect for Anura Kumara Dissanayake, because at the moment they have 3 MPs in parliament, in the current parliament, and it's a 225-member house. And it is expected that a new cabinet will be formed soon, and that the president will call for general elections, which are due, and that might happen in November. And once the new parliamentary composition is known, is when we will also begin to understand the extent of legislative influence the NPP is able to wield, and how it's able to use that to fulfill its pledges, including the abolition of the executive presidency.
Nirupama, I want to bring this question of the executive presidency to you again. What is your sense? I mean, do you think any politicians, are they serious in Sri Lanka about abolishing the executive presidency?
I think the most serious was Chandrika Kumaratunga, and she did really want to do away with it. But I think when push came to shove and it became a question of political survival, the executive presidency became too much of a temptation to retain, because it allows the president to dissolve the government. It allows the president to retain important portfolios, even if there is a government of an opposing party. So it was, in that sense, it has been a very difficult question. It is, there is, as you mentioned, there is a very pious thought among many Sri Lankan leaders that we should go back to the Westminster style of parliamentary democracy, where the prime minister is the executive, and because that is really the true representation of that truly represents the people's will. But always, when somebody becomes a president, I think the powers that the presidency has are too many and too vast to let go of easily. So I don't think at this point, when Anura Kumara Dissanayake needs a parliamentary majority, needs to do many things, immediately, because there's so many expectations of him. I don't think he will let go of the executive presidency very easily. I don't think it's politically possible for him to do that.
Nirupama, the other thing I want to ask you is on the ethnic question. We've spent years and years debating drafts, discussions. We saw many things, and as I agree with you that Chandrika Kumaratunga was probably the most serious as far as devolution of power or even abolition of the executive presidency was concerned. But we are now in a situation where where nothing really seems to have moved much, and expectations are very minimalist, even from Tamil politicians who've reverted to the 13th Amendment. I remember a time when I was posted in Colombo when nobody was really taking the 13th Amendment very seriously, apart from seeing it as a kind of a base to build upon Tamil rights into a new constitution. So, what is your sense? And I also feel, maybe it's not a very popular view, but I also feel that the provincial councils for for north and the northern and eastern part of Sri Lanka probably makes sense. For the rest of the country, I think this is a question that needs to be answered. Whether in such a small country do you need provincial councils, and what kind of issues they would have with the central leadership. But the question I want to ask you is that, is it time for India and the Tamil politicians to move beyond the traditional notions of what is the ethnic question and what can be done? Because looking at it from a distance from Delhi, I would think that investment, jobs, development of the north and the east, equitable development of the north and the east, along with southern Sri Lanka, would possibly be something which would help the people much more today.
I think, Amit, that perhaps it's too soon for people to accept that jobs and development will now be the main panacea for their aspirations. I think unless the question of Tamil political aspirations are resolved, and which means basically the powers to govern their own space, their own corner of Sri Lanka, which is the northern, which is predominantly the northern district, the northern region. I think this question will remain unresolved. And by governing, I don't mean sort of an independence or a separation, but just power to decide what they should do with their own resources. And I think one of the chief stumbling blocks in the implementation of the 13th Amendment was that Colombo never wanted to give the powers over land and, of course, the police powers to northern Sri Lanka, or at that time the northeastern Sri Lanka. So I think unless that question is resolved, it is not going to help very much to say, okay, here are jobs and here's development. Because as we know, in Kashmir also there has been the attempt to substitute jobs and development as a resolution of problems. But there are political aspirations today in Kashmir, and you're seeing them in full play in the elections. And so in Sri Lanka also there are these aspirations, and I think as long as that continues to fester without being addressed, it will have some kind of ripple effect in India, in Tamil Nadu. I'm not saying it's a big issue in Tamil Nadu right now. It is not. In fact, the issue of the fishermen on their competition for scarce resources on the two sides, that is the bigger issue. But as long as it continues to fester, someone or the other in Tamil Nadu is going to make that an issue, and that in turn will affect the larger Indian polity. So I would say that it is not time for us to move on. I think India does well by pointing out that there is a 13th Amendment, and when people say we need to go beyond the 13th Amendment, I would take the view. I mean, I'm looking at it as from India, so maybe I'm not putting myself in Sri Lankan Tamil shoes enough, but I would say that this is the only provision that has found its way into the Constitution. It is a constitutional provision. It exists, and if that were to be implemented fully for a few years, and if Sri Lankans across the country got a chance to see how that works, then it would be fair to say, okay, let's now move on, and let us reframe the ethnic question in a different way. As of now, I also said that I just wanted to address that the rest of the country will happily go back to being a central a unitary government. I don't think so, because if you look at many of the JVP people right now, They opposed the provincial council system when it was brought in 1987, but they benefited a lot from it by being part of this provincial council system. It has brought up a lot of grassroots politicians. It has actually led to this all change that you see right now, because earlier it used to be said that Colombo was ruled by Colombo 7 and Colombo 3. These are the postal districts where all the posh and elite people live. But now you can, if you look at the kind of setup that you have, even in the SLPP, even in the SJB, Sajid's SJB, they are from all over the country, and across these regions, they are politicians who have come up through the provincial council system. So I think it's done it's been quite advantageous for a lot of parties, for a lot of politicians, and I doubt they will give it up in a hurry.
So we will watch what happens on that front. But Meera, I just wanted to, ask you, what can we expect on the foreign policy front from Anura Kumara Dissanayake, specifically with regard to India and China? Because these two binaries are what seem to be defining many people's thought processes in Delhi. So what do you think? I saw that the Indian High Commissioner called on him last evening. And I'd really be interested in knowing what you think is going to happen in the weeks and months ahead.
Yeah, Amit, that's right. The Indian High Commissioner, I think, was the first Colombo-based diplomat to call on the president-elect last evening. And we also saw a tweet from Prime Minister Modi and President Dissanayake responding to that. I think well ahead of the elections, Anura Kumara Dissanayake has been very explicit in his foreign policy plans, which is that he has repeatedly said that an NPP government will be mindful of the security concerns of neighboring countries, especially India. It's also stated in the manifesto. And they have sought to be neutral and maintain equidistance with all partners. And in fact, all key candidates took that same position. And Anura Kumara Dissanayake, because of the JVP's anti-India past, there was a lot of concern about how they might actually, take a position on foreign policy. But he has said that the reality is India is Sri Lanka's closest neighbor. And interestingly, when he was asked about the geopolitical concern, he said that Sri Lanka doesn't have geopolitical concerns. India and China do. So we don't have to get into that game. Instead, we will engage with both partners in the best interests of Sri Lanka. And he has said he will definitely welcome Indian investment. He made that speech in Trincomalee recently. He said Indian investments, including from the private sector. However, he has made a remark that projects like the Adani Power Project, which is ongoing in Mannar and Punerin in the northern province, and which is also being contested at the Supreme Court at the moment. He has said that projects like that, which didn't come through a tendering process, would be scrutinized. And in one speech, I think he has said that he will cancel such a project, but we are yet to see what specific policy decisions will be made. But in general, it has been conciliatory, and the visit to India was also seen as very significant. He was, he met the foreign minister at that time, and also the national security advisor. And when NSA Doval was in Colombo more recently, he again met all candidates, including Anura Kumara Dissanayake. And I think the messaging has been clear in stating that the NPP wishes to engage with India closely, given the proximity and the significance of a partnership in trade, economic assistance, development cooperation, and so on. So we have to see how this pans out in terms of specific policy decisions.
And what's your sense? I mean, the tag Marxist is used with the JVP. And we do know that that term can mean many things in many situations, especially, in today's world. So what is your sense? Say on the Israel-Palestine question, where would the JVP stand?
The JVP is very much pro-Palestine, and prominent members have actually been heading a Palestinian solidarity group in Colombo. So I think they are clear on that question. In terms of being Marxist, well, yes, the JVP is a party with Marxist-Leninist roots, but we also saw the trajectory of the party change, through the 70s and 80s. So the first insurrection was really, based on Marxist ideals, and it was, to topple capitalism and to achieve social justice and democracy. And by the time the second insurrection happens, the JVP is a far more Sinhala nationalist, chauvinistic party, and critics, including those within the Sri Lankan left, saw the party abandoning its Marxist values of the past. So I think it's perhaps not very helpful to stick to that tag to describe the JVP of today. It's factual that their roots lie there, but we also have to factor in what the party has seen in terms of change over the last 3 decades, and its more recent desire to appeal to a wider base, and then the formation of this more centrist, at best center-left social coalition like the National People's Power. So in that sense, foreign policy will also be shaped by a significant degree of pragmatism, like Nirupama said, and we have to really see how they reconcile their past politics, their current desire to stay in power, and their very big challenge to actually address expectations of the Sri Lankan people.
Meera, I'm going to come back to you soon, but I'm just going to go to Nirupama since she has to leave us. Nirupama, what is your sense on India and China? What will be the JVP's approach?
Amit, I see it in this way. India says that it has strategic autonomy in this war that is raging in one corner of Europe between Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It says it has a strategic autonomy to walk this very fine balance between the two countries. It can do business with Russia. It can propose peace, to Ukraine and all that. I think every country has strategic autonomy, and every country makes its choices. And in that respect, I think Sri Lanka also has been for years. It has had great relations with China since Mrs. Bandaranaike's time. Mrs. Bandaranaike actually led a plan to make peace between India and China in the 1962 war. A third world group of countries under her leadership, they came together. So Sri Lanka has had excellent relations with China over the years, and it has very good ties with India as well. So I think, like all other countries in the neighborhood, there is also something that comes out of being a smaller neighbor to a big country like India. An economy, population, all that. There are fears amongst all neighbors, and Sri Lanka is not alone in that. And every political leader, whether it is a Dissanayake or a Vikramasinghe or a Rajapaksa or a Kumaratunga, everyone is going to see what they can get out of balancing these two big powers that are vying with each other, as Meera pointed out, saying that is their geopolitics. Sri Lanka does not have those geopolitical concerns. It may be a bit of an overstatement for AKD to say that, but yes, I mean, they are in the thick of it, really. But he, like other leaders before him in Sri Lanka, will have to balance that relationship. And obviously, he's going to see what best he can get out of this leveraging. And India must have the patience to see it that way, to see that this is a replication of India's own dealings with the world, that Sri Lanka or any other country in the neighborhood is doing. Why would a leader not want the best for their country out of two neighbors vying for influence in his country, in that country? So I think this is how it will go, and we have to be patient to see how we can manage that relationship better, how we can manage to have that relationship with Sri Lanka in which we get our geopolitical concerns addressed.
Well, Thank you so much, Nirupama, for joining us today from Chennai. I know you have a piece to finish on the Sri Lankan elections, so I'm going to let you go. Thank you so
Thank you
much for
so much. Thank you. Thank you, Meera, as well.
And to get back to you, Meera, what is the question that, one of the questions that's been in my mind since yesterday is that, so we have the JVP and we have AKD. So do you think that AKD's personality or views are going to be more important than the JVP's own positions, or he's part and parcel of a political culture where collective decision making, there's great store laid by collective decision making.
Right. So, Anura Kumara Dissanayake has been the leader of JVP for 10 years now, 2014 onwards. And the party and Anura Kumara Dissanayake himself, they have tried to articulate this view that the party is, the party engages in collective decision making, that it's not a leader centric party, and that it doesn't matter what the individual thinks. So that was until AKD became president. Now that he wields this enormous power, we have to see how decision making is done, especially when the party also is going into a phase of elections, and where they will need a parliamentary majority. I think the more interesting question also to look at would be the sort of what NPP has sought to project itself as in public as this more broad-based, centrist, center-left force, and then the traditional JVP base, which might have expectations from its party based on its past trajectory. So that is the, I think, relationship that many are curious to, see how that plays out, because this relationship between NPP within NPP and JVP is what I think is going to determine many future policies. But I think for practical purposes, JVP is the core political force, the core political constituent of this coalition. And we should expect that the party has a lot of say in how things go ahead. And within the party so far, they have maintained and also in good measure demonstrated that it's not a very leader-centric approach to decision making.
And what is your sense? A lot of things are about perception and tags, which may or may not be true. What is your sense as to how, say, the business community and international companies, how would they perceive this kind of a government?
I think the NPP has, over the last few years, and especially in the run up to this election, gone out of its way to quote the private sector, business community, and even their messaging, their manifesto is very, very welcoming of private investment. They want to work with the private sector, the business community. So I think, despite past perceptions, although the business community itself or the business elite may still feel skeptical to engage, I think the NPP has definitely started a conversation with them, and many have gravitated to that side. And we saw a business forum where leading Colombo business personalities were present, and even at the swearing-in ceremony today, we saw some notable business people present. So I think the NPP has given a very clear message to the private sector and the business community that they actually want to do business with them.
And before I leave you, Meera, today, I'm sure you have lots of things to do on a busy day. What is your sense of what kind of opposition can we expect? From Sajid Premadasa, what's Ranil Wickremesinghe's future? Do you see any new opposition forces on the horizon? And, what will the Tamil parties do? I know it's a bit of a broad-based question, but I thought that we could look at all these elements in that question.
Sure. I think Sajid Premadasa is still the leader of opposition, and his party has over 50 MPs. And we should see whether there is some sort of reconfiguration before the parliamentary elections, something linked to what you asked earlier. If the camps, the UNP and the SJB, can in fact come together, we should wait to see if that happens before the general election. But in terms of immediate opposition, Mr. Premadasa had a very conciliatory and thoughtful message on social media platform X yesterday after the election outcome was clear. And he has, said he will support the new government in its endeavor to fix the economy and work with them constructively. So I think there is that, in fact, this election and the period after the outcome, it has been very, very conciliatory. The optics between the two main opposition candidates at the Election Commission's announcement center yesterday, it's all been seen as positive signs of different political actors, responsible, thoughtful political actors wanting to actually contribute and engage. But all this will be true only until the race for the parliament begins, and then we'll see how each of these forces position themselves. In terms of Ranil Wickremesinghe, most commentators here think his political career might be over, but I wouldn't say anything like that, because that was what was said even before he was made president in extraordinary circumstances. So I do not want to say that, but for now, definitely this show has meant that the vast majority of Sri Lankans did not find his rule over the last 2 years addressing their economic concerns, although some may acknowledge there was an element of stability that returned. In terms of other actors, I think one force to watch would be the Rajapaksas. Now, this election, Namal Rajapaksa was fielded by the SLPP, the party of the Rajapaksas, and definitely not to win, but to consolidate what remains of the party, especially after some members decided to back Ranil Wickremesinghe. But now we have to see if those members who were with Mr. Wickremesinghe actually return to the Rajapaksa fold, because they will have to contest a general election from a known party. And the Rajapaksas will, I think, seeing their trajectory in the past, and especially during the Yahapalnya government when they were in opposition, they will seek to steadily build their strength in opposition and work towards the next presidential election. I think they are one force to watch. In terms of Tamil parties, they have a lot of work ahead because, as I mentioned, it's a very, very fragmented Tamil polity and electorate. So if they want to consolidate their position in the next parliament and with the new president, they have to really, I think, address many, many concerns that currently divide them as a political force, and which have definitely weakened them as a voice in national and regional politics. So that would also be in focus going forward in the next few weeks, because if we are to see a general election in November or soon, there's actually very limited time for all this to happen. So it will be very important to see how each of these political interests shape their campaigns and aims going forward.
And my very last question to you, Anura Kumara Dissanayake has said that he will not take people from other parties. I think this is something which he said yesterday. So what do you make of that? I mean, is he trying to signal that, his party, or he will not be, he's not interested in the politics of defection, as it were?
Yes, I think one of the key tenets of his campaign was really differentiating the NPP from any other party. So in that, it was seen as crucial for the campaign to distance itself from all existing political actors, because they were presenting themselves as the other to the tainted political order or establishment. So at that time, he emphasized that he will not enter into any agreement with the existing political class or parties in alliance, and he will not take people who are defecting from these parties. But at the same time, Anura Kumara Dissanayake, while addressing the question of how they might govern without a majority, has said that he will be open to the possibility of forming government with actors in parliament who are known to be clean, who are not corrupt, and who will be willing to join this project of cleaning up the country. So I think he's left that door a little open. So we should see whether this takes shape as some pre-poll arrangement with actors that have credibility in public domain and politicians who are known for being not for being clean and not corrupt. We have to see whether they consider that kind of arrangement before the election or even after the election, when they possibly need more MPs to form government, whether they will look at post-poll coalitions and alliances. So I think they have kept that door a little open, but conditionally, saying that it will only be with politicians who are not corrupt, because anti-corruption was one of their main campaign messages. So that's what they've said.
So we'll leave it here for today, Meera. We look forward to reading your reports about what else happens in the days and weeks ahead. Exciting and important times for Sri Lanka as it enters a new phase in its history. Who would have thought that the JVP would one day, one of its leaders would have become and would become the executive president of the country. We'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much, Meera, for joining us from Colombo today.
Thank you, Amit.